All right, Group 8. I've got Chad Renault with me. I'm delighted to have you. Thank you for coming. And let's talk Trans Am, because Sears Point, Laguna Seca, Bridgehampton, Riverside, these were classic circuits where Trans Am in the late 60s and early 70s became a phenom, didn't they? They became a phenomenon in racing.
Yeah, and this track, as far as its history, couldn't be almost any better in the sweet spot. It opened its first and had its first Trans Am in the same year in 1969, and Jeff O'Neill's actually driving a '69 Budmore Boss.
That's right.
That he actually used to, when his first race that he ever saw Trans Am was '69 here at Sears Point. So he's actually out there on the track that he first saw a Trans Am car in a '69 Budmore Boss. Pretty darn special.
Yeah, Tony Perella, who I work with in SVRA, who runs the SVRA series, also at Watkins Glen as a little fella, fell in love with Trans Am when he saw it. He now owns the series. It's just a great story. And again, just as this whole event is, these are the exact cars that drove here at Sears Point and Sonoma and Laguna and made Trans Am what they, the series that is now the longest road running series in America. Began in 1966, but it really wasn't. The sweet spot was probably 69, 70, when the likes of Roger Penske, bringing drivers like Mark Donohue and so many others, Vic Elford, you just saw Peter Gregg there in that 16 name on the side of that car, Jim Haig at the wheel of that. But there really is an absolute fantastic history here. And the reason why this captured the imagination, I think, of both Americans and drivers around the world, which was, it wasn't no holds barred, that's not fair. It was just really good racing drivers not holding back and not worrying about whether the other guys got hit or the panel got beaten up. 2.5 hour races in these absolute monsters. So it was endurance in its own way for the engines and the tires. But they went hell-bent for leather at circuits like this, and the fans loved it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to me when I see the amount of time that they spend in these cars, and with worse brake pad technology than we have today, and worse tire technology. Even though these are out of an original Goodyear mold, I'm sure the compound's better. So what they're doing for 2.5 hours was just mind-boggling.
I mentioned Roger Penske, and of course Penske coming in and had Chevy Camaros at first, but then got the deal with Javelin, and so we've got a 1970 AMC Javelin, Bruce Canepa at the wheel, one of the great historic drivers of his era and currently. And there's that number 16 we just heard from Jim Haig. Another storied car too. They've got the number 10, Ken Epsom, at the wheel of another AMC Javelin from 1972.
Yeah, Kenny's car's painted as the 72 because it did run in 72, but it actually started out as a 70 Penske Javelin as well. Then it was sold to Roy Woods. They made it yellow in 71 and then red, white, and blue because it came in a factory car in 72.
Yeah, I think, when you think about Jim Hall, you think about Roger Penske, I think that was what elevated these stock cars to be just a little bit more special than they were kind of invented for. These were stock cars. That's another reason why the crowd got behind them, because these were cars that, it was the ethos of, race on Sunday, buy on Monday, and these were regular cars, but there was nothing regular once they dipped them in acid to make them light, once they took the headlights out, once they made them as light as they possibly could, and then brought world-class drivers like Mark Donohue, like Titus, I forgot his name.
Jerry Titus.
Jerry Titus, sorry.
Yeah.
But so many great drivers. Parnelli Jones.
George Fulmer.
George Fulmer. And such a huge part. And now John Hildebrand leading the race. Another big fan of these cars and has pedaled many of them. I mentioned Ken Epsman. Then you've got John Chip Fudge.
Yeah, Chip Fudge is up. Patrick Burns, one of our guys, he's in third right now in that 67 Shelby Notchback.
Well, tell us about your guys and how you guys, what's your little corner of this?
Yeah, so actually I started racing these things in 1999. I still race them, but I got out of the software business and decided I wanted to make a go out of this. So supporting a whole bunch of old vintage race cars, and then a number of people that I was just trying to get them into the group, so I was trying to sell them cars, and then they wanted us to work on them. So now we work on about 20 cars,
wow.
and we work on about maybe 10 to probably 12 historic Trans Am cars. They don't all run at the same time right now. I think we only have 5 out there, but still, we don't have as many. We have more cars and less drivers, so it's all good. Yeah, Patrick's out there. Richard Goldsmith in this Posey Challenger.
Yep. Sam Posey.
Yep. Chris Liebenberg, we do a little bit of work for. He's in the George Fulmer 70 Budmore Boss. We've got the Rusty Jowett 68 Camaro that Daniel Goldsmith's in, and we've got the AAR Cuda that Bill Ockerland's in. Yeah,
no question that you put the best. You mentioned Budmore. You get the best of NASCAR, the best of IMSA or sports cars, and then Roger Penske, and then suddenly you've got some serious motorsport players. Add those drivers, add these stock cars, and suddenly you can see where it all came together as this. Is that the Grey Ghost?
Yeah, Grey Ghost is in the lead. John Hildebrand, yep.
Yep, at the front.
Ken Adams, super quick driver, in second, too, in that 69 Boss that was originally driven by a guy named Paul Petty.
Yes.
Super quick driver, and Ken Adams, and he's so darn, you can feel so confident around him. He's so safe, and he knows where everybody is around him, and he can place that car wherever he wants. Jimmy's playing right there, I think, in 5th or so. He's toying with these guys, like he said in the interview before. He's trying to save his tires, and I guarantee at the end he'll be right up at the front.
Yeah, and there was no question that this was pure American, pure muscle, the epitome of what we've been talking all morning about, why the Americans love their displacement, and always, it's always been about power. You talk to American, well, what do you get to the wheel? What do you it's always almost based on the drag figures, isn't it? It's almost like, what can you do over 4 seconds, right, and so on and so forth. And any American in racing is almost sort of bent that way, as it were. And this championship, Trans Am, in its history, we just celebrated 2023's Trans Am series at COTA just a week ago. And it's still going strong. It's unbelievable. We had 46 cars.
It's fantastic.
At COTA doing Trans Am, and some really fantastic talent. Championship won by a 15-year-old ex-world kart champion.
In TA2, right?
In TA2.
Yeah, unbelievable. That TA2 class is so strong. It's so
Tommy
many good
Kendall was a household name in Trans Am, and he was like the youngest thing since sliced bread. Well, Brent Cruz is 15 and Connor Zilic 17. That's who chased him home.
Amazing.
And we've got many more, Evan Slater. And so there's almost not a rebirth, because it's been going ever since, but it's as strong today, in my opinion, as it's ever been. And these cars, this historic view of what we call the golden era of Trans Am, where it was big money from the manufacturers, I think that's the key. Was that they put so much money into it, which therefore meant we could pay the drivers to come and drive the cars, and we therefore got fantastic close racing. But these guys do a pretty handy job of showing them off in exactly the way they would have been back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
The 44, that's Nelson, is it Calais or Cal?
I think it's Calais.
Calais, 69 Chevrolet Camaro he's in. We've got a couple of Shelby Mustang Boss 302s, as you'd expect. We've got that Tempest out there, which is a real one-off, that GTO, that Grey Ghost, as it was called, the number 49. We've got a Mercury Cougar out there as well.
Yeah, that Mercury Cougar's got all its original paint. Some of the dirt, I think, from Riverside is still stuck in it from 67 to 68. It's never been restored, and just prepared by Michael Eisenberg, and he's been running that thing for years. I remember when he first bought it from the fellow who had it before him, and he was just so happy, and he's tried to preserve every part of it.
You know, you mentioned Parnelli Jones, but Mark Donohue we've already mentioned. Peter Revson, somebody who, again, did Trans Am, did Can-Am, did everything, but a world-class Formula One driver. Yep. Really fantastic. Vic Elford, I mentioned, we've lost him sadly. There's Jeffrey O'Neill in that Boss Mustangs in 1969.
I'm going to have to start calling him Jeffrey. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I just thought it was Jeff.
No. And the good thing about Jeff is Jeffrey. But no, the good thing about Jeff is he's very laid back. He gets to drive these absolute unobtainium cars and be trusted with them. And I love the fact that he's running the event but still enjoying it. I asked Ryan Turi today if he was going to go out, because he's another guy that can pedal these cars, and he said, I'm not going to have time, there's too much to do.
Yeah.
Jeffrey O'Neill said, bugger it, I'm just going to get in and drive. It's the only time I get any quiet.
Yeah, I think even in the practice and the qualifying sessions, he was only running a few laps because he had so many other things to do, which
exactly.
I don't blame him.
Now that's the 28 just going through shot there. That's Brian Ferrin in a 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 302.
Yeah, Brian's a good guy. He's had a number of cars. He used to own the 71 George Fulmer Budmore Boss, the body in white car that Chip Connor has. It's not here today, but he used to have that car as well. Super good guy. Loves these cars, loves the history, and drives the cars well. And he even restored 2 cars now for the group, and has done a wonderful job.
So the race being led by Jim Hay in that 1966 Ford Mustang.
Yes, this is a nice little grouping here with Brian and one of our guys, Daniel Goldsmith, right there in the 68 Rusty Jowett Camaro.
That car leading the race was originally from Tousley Ford in White Bear Lake, Minnesota.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. These cars were available all over the country at this time.
Yep.
Because effectively they were stock cars.
Yep. And with some, and then the GM and Ford and American Motors made neat parts that were available over the counters for these guys to add to them to make them pretty capable. That's one of our guys going back out.
Oh, good. He's going back out, not coming back in.
Yeah, I guess that's good.
Nice little battle here. The AMC Javelin. There's the 10 best again. That looks like the most unlikely of race cars you'd ever want to look at. But
yeah, what Herb Adams did, he was the GM engineer that built that car, and he took his wife's Tempest to do it, and then they called it a GTO. But what he did on that car, made a special front spindle. It's got a special lubrication system for the motor to last. It's got a really neat multi-piece rear end that gives it camber in the rear end, which is a total cheat, but it's the way they described it is it made it easier to do gear changes, and that's the only reason they did it, but they got away with it. Just a fantastic car. I went out and looked at that car before John bought it. I wanted it for myself. But we couldn't come to terms, but John bought it a couple years, maybe a year and a half after, and it's a neat car.
You know, I talk about innovation and just sheer creativity. We're talking about those AMC Javelins, the Penske ones. And in 1970, one of those Javelins, or one of the Javelins that Penske entered into the Trans Am Series that year, also raced in the Daytona 24 Hours as a shakedown.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. So he did a full 24-hour test in it, make sure it was fine.
Yeah. So matter of fact, they even used to allow what kind of one endurance race a year would be in the Trans Am schedule early on, like Daytona or Sebring, which is just really neat.
That's brutal too.
It is wickedly brutal.
Now, current Trans Am, we do 100 miles. Takes about an hour, just over. But these races back in the 60s and early 70s were some 2.5 hours long.
Yes. Yeah.
No air conditioning, because you pull that out. No radio to listen to.
200 or 250 miles. Yeah, just.
Long way.
Oh, boy.
Is that one of yours?
That was Brian. No, that wasn't one of mine.
Okay, good.
That was Brian Farron. He looks like he handled it. Maybe somebody got it a little. Maybe somebody slowed up more than he thought they were going to. So hopefully it was just.
Oh, it was a lockup, it wasn't oil. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think it was just a brake lockup.
So Burns picked up the lead in the 15X, and that is Patrick Byrne in the 1967 Shelby Group 2 Trans Am. And he's just got ahead of Jim Haig. Hildebrand now third in the Pontiac. Calais in the 44. And that's the 69 Chevrolet Camaro. And O'Neill currently in 6th position.
Kind of a neat little fun story. If you read Sam Posey's Mudge Pond Express, he talks about the 70 season. He didn't get the Dodge deal until the end because he thought he was going to get the AMC deal. So he was literally.
That's right.
He was literally thinking that he was getting the AMC deal. He's in the motel. They tell him to wait, or hotel. Tell him to wait in the lobby. He sees Roger walk out. He's like, "Oh, I'm doomed." And sure enough, Roger got the contract. And so then Sam went and got the Dodge contract. I love Sam Posey. That guy's just amazing.
Oh, his voice too.
Everything, his words, is just amazing, and he can do anything. Even his Iditarod coverage back in the 80s and 90s was just mind blowing.
Yeah, and very lucky at Lime Rock to see how he is honoured there, because that's where it all started for him. And you forget that he jumped. He had an amazing. I mean, talk about youngsters coming through. I mean, Sam Posey was another one that started well early.
Very young.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, there he is. And he did the classic race school and all the rest of it, and then suddenly jumped straight into Trans Am.
He said that it was like the first thing that he'd ever done in his life where he was good at when he was racing his friend in like some kind of sled that they made. Or some kind of little go-kart that they made, and he was the first thing that he could do better than his friend, and he's like, oh, I got to do this. Sam, when he got into this car, I think we went to Lime Rock last year, and we put Sam in this car, and when we were putting his legs into the car and getting him all situated, there's not a really good spot for him in the passenger side, but when we were putting him in there, I said to Sam, are you okay? And he said, I'm about to be.
Great line. And that papaya-coloured, almost McLaren-looking Peter Gregg car, the number 16. Chris Liebenberg at the wheel.
Chris is a good guy, super good guy. It's a quick car, too.
Another good story for you, because it connects to here at Sonoma. When Penske got rid of his Camaros, he sold them off, because he actually thought he was quitting. He didn't think he would pick up the Javelin deal, as you just alluded to. So he sold them off, and he sold them to some interesting folk. He sold one to Jim Hall of Chaparral, one to Craig Murray, the president of Sears Point, and the third to Roy Woods Racing. So there you go. That all fits, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, we support the 69 Penske car that went to Roy Woods that you just mentioned, and then Tom's in the car. Tom McIntyre, who's been running this ever since the very first historic Trans Am. He's in the car that Craig Murray got, the 68 Penske Camaro. There's really great, fantastic photos of it when it's first shakedown here, just after he bought it and just after the tracks opened. Just really a neat guy. Craig Murray, you're president of the track here at Sears Point.
And by the way, may I add, back in those days, back in the late 60s and early 70s, you would get 50 to 70,000 people coming just to watch the highlight of Trans Am. There was lots of other people on the card or lots of other cars out there, but that's how many people would come to a Trans Am race. Yeah,
and at Laguna Seca, that you could just see the hillside would be covered with them. They're just sitting on the dirt hillside or the ice plant hillside. It was just fantastic.
I did many years of World Superbikes, and it's the same fandom. You know, there's something that speaks to a fan when they are racing a bike that they can see in the showroom. And even if they can't afford it, it just says, hey, that's the car I recognize, that's the car I see on the road, on the motorway, on the freeway, and there's an instant connection there. And that's what brings the fans out to follow production-based motorcycle racing, as it does for, NASCAR and Trans Am. They're stock cars in effect. Obviously, now with tube frame and all the rest of it, it's not quite the same. But back then, they were.
Yep.
Proper production cars. And I would have thought the likes of Penske probably learned a lot by taking something that was rough and ready, let's face it, rather than purpose-built for racing.
Yep. And made them, they work pretty darn good. For what they are, and the neat thing is you can still get parts for these cars and modify them the way they were modified in the period, and you don't have to make them from brand new stuff that doesn't exist. So it's kind of neat that you can do that on some of these things.
Yeah, I mentioned it briefly, but one of the tricks, if you like, and there were plenty of them, to try to make them more lightweight, to make them more powerful, to soup them up, to find ways of just making them quicker. They actually dip these cars in acid. And think about it, if you take a piece of metal and and dip it in acid, it's going to eat it immediately. But they just put it to within an inch of its life, as it were. And there are times where there were stories where the stewards or the guys, scrutineering these cars would put their hand on the bonnet and go, hang on a minute.
Yeah. Getting back to the Sam Posey car.
Yeah.
First race of the season, End of Tech. They hand John Tamanis, the head of SCCA Tech, a beer. He puts his arm back, leans onto the roof, and it puts a huge dent in it. And he's like, "Oh boy, we got a problem, boys."
Yeah.
Within an hour, they were back down at the closest Dodge dealership, cutting the roof off another car and putting it on it.
Yep.
Just neat stuff.
But that's racing. I mean, you know, you could say, well, that's cheating, isn't it? But, you know, to be honest, pushing it to the limit and taking it over the limit and pushing the rules to the limit is what motor racing is. And let's be honest, it's not just the drivers who are taking the risks. It's mechanics, engineers, designers, et al. And that goes all the way to Formula One today.
Yep.
You know, so, and any form of motorsport, that's the game. That is the moving target that is motor racing, and long may it continue. But that's what made brilliant people like Adrian Newey and like Dan Gurney,
Yep.
Jim Hall, and so many others. It is that sort of, well, what can we do that will give us that edge? We've all got the same equipment, roughly. Checkered flag out.
Oh, boy.
Oh, what a finish, too. Peter Gregg's car looks as though he's got a victory.
I think he got it.
I do think he did. Jim Hay
He
wins.
called it.
He did call it. He said, I'll beat that guy. That's what I'm going to do. He told Taylor how it was. Beating Nelson Calais right at the wheel there. Sorry, we're telling stories, but we're watching the action as well. I hope you're enjoying it. Patrick Byrne in third. Jeffrey O'Neill taking fourth. Ken Adams taking fifth. You know, each and every one of these races as we go through the day is just getting more and more competitive. We had a Lotus versus Ferrari earlier in the day. Now we've had a fantastic 1-2-3 in Trans Am. And, Chad, what are your thoughts on the first viewing of our weekend here?
I was just looking at your grid to see where our guys finished.
Where did they go? Where did they go?
I think we got the, let's see, third.
Yep.
8th.
Yep, Richard Goldsmith. Yeah, in the Dodge.
11th, Daniel.
Yep.
Chris, we got his car ready for this thing.
Good.
And Bill Auckland, we're just going to have to see how he had that problem where he came through the pits, so hopefully he's okay.